Is anyone familiar with the name Marie Kondo? She is the sensation that has been taking over the nation. The Netflix documentary that stars her is called Tidying Up. And she has this, she has this process whereby you go through your entire house and you go through in a very systematic order and you pick everything up and you ask, does it spark joy? And if it does, you keep it. And if it doesn't, you send it on to someplace else. It is not about the quantity of use. It's not about, do I use this thing? It's about, does it bring me joy? What has happened is there has been a massive uptick in Goodwill donations. We're shocked, right? Yeah. Houston up 22%, Roanoke, Virginia 20%, DC 30%. This is just the month of January, guys. Grand Rapids up 16%. Tampa Bay had an additional 5 million pounds of clothes, furniture, and other items that were donated just in January. There has become this outpouring of generosity that has really come out of necessity. As we talk about generosity this morning, I feel a great way to define it is to call it intentional giving beyond what is expected. And as we consider it as an ancient practice, we see that it is about giving to God first. All the way back, Genesis 14:20. Abram, first instance of the tithe, he gives 1/10 of what he has to God. Exodus chapter 35, verse 5, take an offering to the Lord. This is a part of the commands. All throughout Leviticus and Deuteronomy, it talks about tithing, it talks about the first fruits. In Malachi chapter 3, verse 10, take a full tithe into the storehouse and see if I will not pour out enough blessings upon you to overwhelm you. Jesus talks about money a whole lot. Acts chapter 2, verse 45, the beginning of the church, the believers came together. They offered all of their possessions into one big pot. They sold whatever they had that they didn't need, and they gave it to the poor. Paul talks about money as well, and then tells a specific story of some people who are having a really hard time in life. 2 Corinthians chapter 8, verses 2-4, he says, they gave accordingly to their means and even beyond their means, begging us earnestly for the privilege of sharing in this ministry to the saints. We fast forward a few centuries or more, and we hear Wesley, the one upon which we have founded our denomination, and he says, earn all you can, save all you can, and give all you can. It is not about what we can obtain and what we can maintain for ourselves, but how do we give that all away? And as I look at all the different scriptures that talk about money, that talk about tithing, that talk about giving to God, how I would sum it up is to say how we use what we have matters to God. How we use what we have matters to God. We are called as Christians, as followers of Christ, to go forward and to help others in whatever way that we can. And often we think it's a conversation or we think it's simply an action, but sometimes it has to do with the monies that we can give in order to facilitate ministry. How we use what we have matters to God. Now, we as Christians have the opportunity to give anywhere, and I'll tell you what, the trend in the U.S. is going up. We are giving more than we have ever given before. But interestingly enough, guess where we're not giving? The church. The trend is going down. People are finding out there's all kinds of awesome organizations that need our funds, and it is good and it is great to give to those. But what we've found is that we in the church are terrified of asking for money. Years ago, Josh and I attended a workshop for the Rejuvenate Ministry project that was partnered with Lily that came through and was able to help us out with our college loans. It was a phenomenal blessing in our lives. But the guy who started it, David Bell, I believe his name was, the first thing he said to us, he said, on my way here, I was asked no less than 7 times to give money. Drove through Wendy's, you want to give $1, stopped at Meijer, you want to give $1, stopped at all these different places, you want to give $1 for all these different things. He said, you know who doesn't ask? The church. And I think sometimes it's because we don't talk about as a church how we spend our money. We, as a church, our goal is to spend all of our resources in such a way that we honor and glorify God, so that we can grow our community here in the church, so that we can grow our community beyond our walls, and so that we can help others experience the love of Christ. Now, it's easy to take a second and say, hey, let me see your balance sheet. I want to see how the money comes in and how the money goes out. And we look at it, and we see lights and paper towels and stamps and pizza and salaries. But here's what it translates to. The stamp goes on a personal invitation to a youth, an invitation to be a part of something bigger than themselves. And so they come to the church where the lights are on, and they sit around a table eating pizza, and they talk about life, and they are encouraged and challenged by a youth pastor who's been given a salary so that they can be the light to others in Jay County. Now, that light and that encouragement comes, and their culture and their climate changes around their lunch table at school. And all of a sudden, they're talking to another kid who's been feeling alone, and now they've got a place to belong, and now they're coming alongside, and they're sitting around that table, and they're having pizza, and they're feeling a sense of purpose. They are experiencing the love and the grace of Christ through relationship here. It's never just a pizza. It's never just a stamp. It's never just a light bill or paper towels or a staff salary. It is ministry. It's children's Sunday school. It's Brianna's Hope. It's hosting Weight Watchers in the Civic Theater. It's our music ministries. It's 2 youth groups that we are offering. It's our nursery. It's our Monday night meals. It is pastoral care and leadership. Our generosity, or lack thereof, impacts others. And it influences the magnitude of what it is that we can accomplish. I'll give you an example outside of the church. On Facebook, it is very common to share pictures and images and graphics and memes and funny cartoons and all of those things with other people. And there was one going around a while ago that I loved. And it was just a simple artist, and she does lettering and stuff like that. And so I clicked on the picture, and I downloaded it, and I printed it out. And I thought, I'm going to hang this on my wall. And I looked and had a second thought about it, and I said, man, I wonder if she's selling these prints. She's got an Etsy site, and she's selling her artwork. And by going on that site and purchasing this print that I had originally printed out, I was able to facilitate her doing more art and creating more ministry with the words that she has created and that God has given her. Local music and artists. I received a CD from a friend last week from a local artist that they are really a big fan of. And I was trying to get it downloaded onto my computer and into our account. What I realized is their music's already on Google Music, which we could have for free. But it was important to support that artist so they can create more music, so they can continue to glorify God with the gift they've been given. PBS, NPR, WBCL, all of these places ask for, require, receive funds so that they don't have to solicit advertisement from other places. By supporting, artists can create more of their craft, and it's the same thing in the church. It allows our ministries to go further. Perhaps instead of having 50 for VBS, now we can afford to have 100. Maybe instead of giving pizza for 20 youth, now we can have pizza for 40 youth. Perhaps we offer a block party, and instead of 100 hamburgers and hot dogs, now we can afford 300 hamburgers and hot dogs. And it's not right about the hamburgers and the hot dogs. It's about the relationships that are built in those contexts. The more generous we are, the more organizations can do. But in order to be generous, it requires creating and sticking to priorities. Most of us do not have extra cash laying around to just give to any cause. Yeah. Instead, we have to plan and we have to prioritize. So it's once you decide what's first, then you can figure out how you're going to use up what is left. As an example, let's say you get $100 a week. There's 2 ways to look at it. One, you can choose to support an organization with $10 a week and then figure out how to live on the other 90. Or you can spend your money however you want in whatever way you need to and hope that maybe if you have something left, you can offer that off. The first one requires creating priorities and having decisions made and living intentionally, while the other isn't so much about that. The first one requires generous giving and sacrificial giving, where the other one is really more out of convenience and what makes us comfortable. But when we choose what it is that we want to give, we may have to adjust how we live. It may change how often or where we eat out. It may change the types of entertainment that we have or how many years we drive our car or the size house that we're going to live in. We budget so that we can be generous. Now, no one expects a miraculous lifestyle change overnight. It may take many years to get to the goal that you're trying to reach for giving, but you have to start by taking stock. An interesting survey came out just a couple of days ago. The average United Methodist member gives between 2.5% and 3% of their annual income to the church. And I think sometimes we don't take the time to stop and to look and to actually figure out what that percentage is. And it's not so much about what the percentage is, but it's about where we want to be. We ask ourselves, where do we want to be giving, and then how do we budget to get there? And I may be a heretic, so call me out on that now, it's fine. But I'm not certain that there's anything magical about the 10% tithe. I think what's magical about it in biblical context is it was probably enough to be felt. Perhaps you're living on a fixed income and you've got bills up to your eyeballs, and 6% of your income is extraordinarily generous. Perhaps you have a 7-figure salary and 10% makes absolutely no difference in how you live your life. The percentage may not indicate generosity, and so we talk instead about proportional giving. How much can you give? Our task is not to give just enough so that we can be comfortable. Our task is to give enough so that we can be faithful. Consider, as we sit here today, someone gave faithfully so that we could be in this space, we could be in this church, in this worship space, so that you could have Sunday school and church camp and a pastor and a warm church and missions trips and curriculum and all of those kinds of things, and probably pizza too. What is it that God is calling you and challenging you to give? Giving is a spiritual thing. Now, perhaps you're not so passionate about giving money to what feels like lights and heat and perhaps even pizza. But here's the thing. We love UMCOR. We love to give to UMCOR. UMCOR has no administrative costs. When you give to a line item on UMCOR, all of that money goes straight to whatever the missions need is. But that doesn't mean there's actually no administrative costs. When we give our conference tithe, that's what pays for the administrative costs, so that when we give to the missions portion of it, it all goes straight to it. But the missions portion doesn't exist without the administrative piece. The church is a training ground. This is where the life experiences happen. This is where we raise people up to be pastors and missionaries and disciples in their workplace. We grow our community, and then people come in needing emergency help. We can go and we can help them. But this is one of the reasons why we encourage people to give their tithe to the general fund, and then above and beyond that, second mile giving, our capital, our missions, our critical needs, all of these places that need our funds as well. Because without our general fund, our basic ministries like nursery and Sunday school and choir and worship services, they cease to exist. Now, the hope is all of us are able to give money in some way or another, but generosity is more than just money. They're saying, woohoo, she stopped talking about money for a second. Generosity is about more than just money. It's about how we use our time. It is the attitudes that we have. Some of you will have noticed our winter menu today had a listing for Grandparents' Day at East Elementary. East Elementary is having 3 days and 3 sessions a day where they're allowing grandparents to come in and hang out with the kids at the school. Some kids don't have grandparents who are available. Some kids don't have grandparents at all. My dad went for Grandparents' Day for Callie, And he said, it was so cool, but then we got to the end of the day and they said, all right, any of you who don't have grandparents, now you can come down and have punch and cookies. And his heart broke for those kids who didn't have grandparents. And I thought, man, we got grandparents in our church. We got people who may be willing to be generous in their time to go and spend 45 minutes with a kid at the elementary school. It's about our time. It's about our attitude. I'll have sign-up sheets for you later, don't worry. There are so many things that we offer. Perhaps you have a child who has come with you who we get to witness those first steps and those giggles. Perhaps you have been here for so long that you have institutional memory that you can share with others. Perhaps it's your unashamed love for God or your beautiful singing voice or coming in and being an awesome usher. It's all sorts of things. It's about intentionally scheduling our lives so that we can be available for the ministry of God. It is about intentionally setting perspective in our life so we can have an attitude that is honoring to God. When conflict arises, how do you respond? With a generous spirit or a critical one? All of this is connected. Generosity is spiritual. When we give, when we are generous, we become involved and invested and interested in what's going on. We delight then in watching the growth of the church. We delight in the effectiveness of ministry. We delight in seeing the outreach of the church. And generosity is mutually beneficial. It's not just for the organization that you give to, right? It enlarges our souls. We find joy in the gift. It realigns our priorities. It forces us to think through how we use what we have because we know that how we use what we have matters to God. It connects people to the body of Christ and allows more to participate. And it requires money to do ministry. Our annual budget here at the church is just under $376,000. We currently have an estimated income of $284,000. For those of you doing your math, that is a difference of about $90,000, places in which we are relying and hoping and praying and having faith in the generosity of the church to come forward and say, yes, we support these ministries. Giving and being generous benefits us by strengthening congregations to fulfill Christ's ministries. When we all give and we all invest, we come together, we pull up a chair at the table, but not to sit and watch. In fact, we actually put on the uniform and begin to run the place for God. We're no longer a bystander. We're no longer sitting in the stands. We're no longer an armchair champion, right? There's a fun phrase in giving. Anybody ever heard God loves a cheerful giver? 2 Corinthians 9:7, that's one of those biblical statements. The attitude and the motivation is incredibly important. But I don't know. I feel like probably God accepts gifts with all sorts of attitudes and thoughts and feelings. I mean, sometimes generosity comes out of need or a desire to begin a new habit. Sometimes it's hard. Sometimes it's frustrating. Sometimes we want to give up and we have no interest in giving. The goal is joy. But the journey to get there may be bumpy, and that doesn't mean we should stop giving, but instead means we keep giving, we keep investing, and we keep watching what God will do. Journalist Amy Olberding, professor at the University of Oklahoma, she gives a reflection on Marie Kondo and how people are processing through their thoughts about their things. And she says, my wise maid will forego soft talk of joy and use instead a harder, plain-speaking language to assess all that stuff. Does it still have use in it? Most of it probably does, and what does not was probably pretty useless to begin with. After all, usefulness is not the prime criterion for many people's buying habits. But finding that you have a house overstuffed with things useful but never used would promise its own kind of wisdom. It won't spark joy to see it, but then the quest to find joy in all that stuff was never a good strategy to begin with. It's not about the stuff we can attain, the stuff we can acquire, and the stuff we try to fill our lives with to create joy, but it's instead, how do we give and be generous with what we have? May we all seek to give with the same generosity that was given to us. Amen.